The glass walls of Harper and Company. Technologies gleamed like a beacon under the morning sun. It was Monday, the busiest day of the week, when the parking lot filled quickly and the lobby bustled with employees, all eager to be seen early by the executives. At the very top of that pyramid sat Richard Harper, the CEO, tall, sharply dressed and known for his no-nonsense approach. He was a man everyone both admired and feared. Rumor had it that he hadn't taken a vacation in 8 years. He lived for the company. His employees often whispered, "Richard breeds profits, not air." But beneath all the success and prestige was a man who rarely let anyone peek into his heart. He was brilliant, decisive, and intimidating, but warmth wasn't something people associated with him. On the opposite end of this corporate ladder was Angela Morris, a cleaner in the building. She was a single mother in her early 40s who worked 2 shifts a day to make ends meet. Every morning before dawn, she scrubbed marble floors, polished glass doors, and emptied trash bins, while silently carrying the weight of her life. Her son, Malik, was 11, bright-eyed, curious, and protective of his mother in a way that made him seem older than his years. Since Angela couldn't afford daycare, Malik often came with her in the early mornings, sitting quietly in the lobby or near the cafeteria with his school books until it was time to catch the bus. Employees knew him, smiled at him, sometimes offered him snacks. Malik, with his sketchbook always in hand, had become a quiet little fixture in the company's mornings. But this morning was different. Richard Harper had just arrived in his sleek black Tesla, parking in the executive row. He checked his phone as he walked toward the car again. He had forgotten a file in the back seat. His steps were sharp, precise, like everything else about him. Angela was mopping near the entrance. Malik sitting on a bench a few feet away, sketching the building's logo in his notebook. The lobby was calm, the only sounds being the hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic swish of Angela's mop. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, Malik's head shot up. His eyes widened. He dropped his pencil, and in a voice that cracked with urgency, he screamed, "Don't get in the car." The sound echoed through the glassy lobby. Everyone froze. Angela spun around, startled, her mop clattering to the floor. 2 security guards turned sharply toward the boy. Employees paused mid-step, coffee cups trembling in their hands. Richard Harper stopped cold, his hand just inches from the car door handle. His eyes flicked toward the boy, puzzled and irritated. "What?" He barked, his tone sharp. Malik jumped to his feet, breathing hard. His little hands clenched into fists. Please, don't get in that car." His voice was desperate, shaking. Angela rushed over, mortified. "Malik, what are you doing? Sit down." She grabbed his arm gently, trying to hush him, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. This was the CEO, the most powerful man in the building, and her son had just yelled at him like he was about to step into danger. Richard's brow furrowed. A few employees nearby whispered nervously. To question the CEO, to shout at him, this was unthinkable. But there was something in Malik's eyes. Something raw, urgent, almost terrified. For a split second, the powerful CEO and the small boy stared at each other across the distance. The building seemed to hold its breath. Then Richard did something no one expected. He didn't open the car door. Instead, he straightened, turned slowly, and walked back toward the lobby, his eyes still locked on Malik. His usually unreadable face carried an expression none of his employees had seen before. Curiosity mixed with a flicker of unease. Angela's heart pounded. She bent down to Malik, whispering fiercely, "You can't just yell at people like that. What's gotten into you?" But Malik's gaze stayed fixed on the car. His chest rose and fell rapidly. "Something's wrong with it," he whispered, almost to himself. "I just know it." Angela looked at him, torn between scolding and confusion. Richard stopped a few feet away, towering over them. His presence was so commanding that Angela immediately straightened up, nervously brushing her apron. "Mr. Harper, I am so sorry," she stammered. "He didn't mean, he just gets these ideas sometimes. Please forgive him." Richard didn't respond right away. His piercing blue eyes studied Malik, who stood his ground, small but unflinching. "You're saying something's wrong with my car," Richard finally said, his voice low, measured. Malik nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Don't go inside. Please. The lobby fell silent again. Employees who pretended to mind their business were now openly watching, eyes darting between the CEO, the cleaner, and her son. Richard's jaw tightened. He was a man who valued logic, not childish warnings. And yet, something about the boy's conviction gnawed at him. He glanced back at his Tesla. Sleek, perfect, untouched, but his hand. He remembered just now, when he reached for the door handle, there had been a faint, unusual click, something he might have brushed off if not for this strange interruption. Security stepped closer. "Sir, would you like us to check the vehicle?" one guard offered. For a moment, Richard didn't answer. Then, in a voice calm but firm, he said, "Yes, check it." Angela covered her mouth in shock. Malik exhaled shakily, relief flickering across his face. The guards approached the car cautiously. One pulled a small inspection tool from his belt. Another circled around to the other side. A few employees drifted closer to watch, their curiosity overpowering their work obligations. Richard folded his arms, his eyes never leaving the car, or the boy who had stopped him from entering it. Angela stood frozen, torn between fear of losing her job and disbelief at what was unfolding. Malik slipped his hand into hers, squeezing it tightly, and then came the sound, a sharp metallic click, followed by the faint hiss of something releasing under the car. One of the guards' eyes widened. He immediately shouted, "Everyone back!" Chaos erupted. Employees gasped and stumbled away. Angela pulled Malik close to her chest. Richard's face hardened, every muscle in his jaw tightening. Within seconds, the security team was calling for bomb disposal. The Tesla sat there, sleek and silent, but no longer innocent. Richard turned slowly, his gaze landing on Malik again. The boy trembled under the weight of the CEO's stare, but he didn't look away. The moment felt heavy, electric. The cleaner's son had just stopped something unthinkable from happening. And for the first time in years, Richard Harper felt something stir deep inside him, something he hadn't allowed in a long time. Not fear, not anger, but gratitude. The story of what happened that morning was only beginning. The sirens arrived within minutes. Police cars, a bomb disposal unit, and company security swarmed the parking lot of Harper & Company. Technologies. Employees were ushered away from windows, murmurs spreading like wildfire through the building. The CEO's car, something was planted. The cleaner's boy stopped him. Angela sat in the corner of the lobby, clutching Malik so tightly he could barely move. Her heart hammered in her chest. What if Richard fires me? What if he thinks Malik is trouble? What if I lose this job? Richard, however, didn't move from his spot. He stood tall, hands in his pockets, his sharp eyes fixed on the scene outside. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, even when the bomb squad carefully examined the undercarriage of his Tesla. Finally, one officer stepped forward, speaking quietly but firmly. It was a small but sophisticated device, rigged to the ignition. If you had started the car, "Sir, it would have detonated." The words cut through the air like glass. Gasps rippled across the lobby. Angela's knees weakened. She pulled Malik even closer. Richard's jaw clenched, but his face remained unreadable. Only his eyes betrayed a storm. He looked back through the glass, not at the officer, not at the car, but at the boy sitting beside his mother, Angela's burden. Angela had always lived in the shadows, born in a tough neighborhood. She was the youngest of 4 children, the only one to graduate high school. But dreams had slipped through her fingers when she became a mother at just 21. Malik's father had left before Malik turned 2, leaving Angela to face life alone. Cleaning jobs paid little, but they were steady. She took pride in her work, even if no one noticed the polished floors or spotless glass. Her biggest fear was Malik growing up thinking this was all life had to offer. She often told him, "Baby, you're meant for more than this mop and bucket. You've got a fire in you." But Malik was different from other kids. He didn't just see things, he sensed them. Angela had noticed it when he was younger. He'd tug her sleeve just before a car sped around the corner. He'd tell her not to walk a certain block, and minutes later, a fight would break out there. His instincts bordered on uncanny. Angela called it a blessing. Others might have called it strange. Malik simply said, I just feel it, Mama, like something tells me. This morning, when he shouted at the CEO, Angela's heart had nearly stopped. She had wanted to crawl into the floor. But now she realized a strange gift might have saved a life. Richard's walls. Richard Harper wasn't used to being told what to do, especially not by a child. His rise to CEO hadn't been an accident, born into modest means. He had clawed his way up with sheer determination. He wasn't the smartest man in the room, but he was always the most disciplined. But success had come at a price. His wife had left years ago, tired of living in second place to the company. His daughter, Emily, barely spoke to him anymore, living across the country and only calling on birthdays. Richard told himself it didn't matter. He had built an empire. That was his family now. Yet as he stood there, the echo of Malik's voice replayed in his mind. That raw, desperate shout, so full of conviction, had broken through walls he didn't even realize he'd built. What shook him most wasn't the bomb. It was the realization that, for the first time in a long time, someone had cared about whether he lived or died. And it hadn't come from his executives, his board, or his so-called friends. It had come from a cleaner's son. Whispers in the company. By midday, the story had spread across every floor. The CEO almost died. The cleaner's boy saved him. There was a bomb in his car. Speculation ran wild. Who would plan such a device? A competitor? A disgruntled employee? The investigation was underway, but answers were still far away. Angela tried to keep her head down, scrubbing silently, but people kept stealing glances at her. Some looked at her with awe, others with suspicion. She could feel the weight of being seen, not as invisible staff, but as the cleaner whose son saved the CEO. Malik, meanwhile, had become a quiet hero in the eyes of some employees. A young intern even whispered to him, "You're braver than all of us." Malik just blushed, unsure of how to handle the attention. The CEO calls. That evening, as the building emptied, Angela was finishing her last tasks. Malik sat beside her, head resting on his sketchbook, exhausted. "Mrs. Morris," a voice said. Angela jumped. Richard Harper stood in the doorway of the empty conference room, hands in his pockets. The sight of him made her throat dry. "Yes, sir," she stammered, gripping her mop. "Leave it," he said. His tone wasn't sharp this time, but firm. "I'd like to speak with you and your son." Angela hesitated, then set the mop aside. Malik perked up, rubbing his eyes. Richard walked him into the room. It was strange, Angela thought, being invited into a space usually reserved for board meetings and high-level decisions. She felt small, out of place. But Richard's expression wasn't one of superiority. It was searching. He sat across from them, folding his hands. For a long moment, he simply looked at Malik. The boy shifted nervously, but didn't look away. "You shouted at me this morning," Richard said finally. "Why?" Malik swallowed. I just felt it, sir, like something bad was about to happen. I saw you reaching for the car, and it was like a voice in my head screamed, 'Stop him.' So I did." Richard tilted his head. "Do you often sense things like that?" Angela jumped in quickly. "He's just a kid with a strong imagination, Mr. Harper. Please don't think." Richard raised a hand, silencing her gently. His gaze stayed on Malik. "You saved my life." The boy's cheeks flushed. He looked down at his shoes. Richard leaned back, exhaling slowly. Most people in this company follow orders. They wait to be told what to do. Today, you didn't. You trusted your instinct. That is rare. Angela blinked, stunned. Was he complimenting her son? Richard turned to her. "Mrs. Morris, how long have you been with the company?" 6 years, she whispered. "And all this time, you've kept this place spotless. Never late, never a complaint." Angela lowered her eyes. She wasn't used to being noticed, let alone acknowledged. "I just do my job, sir." Richard nodded slowly. "Yes, you do." There was silence for a moment, heavy but not uncomfortable. Then Richard spoke again, his tone softer than before. "I don't believe in coincidences," he said. And today was no coincidence. Angela didn't know how to respond. Malik just watched him, wide-eyed. Richard stood, straightening his jacket. From this day forward, both of you are under my protection. And tomorrow, when this company learns what happened, I want them to hear the truth from me. Angela's mouth fell open. Sir, that's not necessary. We don't want attention. Please, just let us... Richard cut her off gently. Mrs. Morris, your son risked everything to protect me. The least I can do is ensure neither of you is invisible again. He paused at the doorway, turning back once more. His expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Thank you, he said quietly. And then he was gone. Angela sat frozen, Malik leaning against her shoulder. Her heart raced, her thoughts tangled. The most powerful man in the building had just thanked her son. But deep down, she couldn't shake a new fear. Whoever had planted that bomb, would they try again? And now that Richard had promised to protect them, what did that mean for her little boy? The shadows of the past had been stirred, and the future of all three was about to collide in ways none of them could imagine. The next morning, Harper and Company. Technologies buzzed with nervous energy. News of the attempted attack on Richard Harper had leaked to the press overnight, though the company tried to downplay details. The headlines blared. CEO narrowly escapes car bombing. Mystery surrounds attack on tech giant. Cleaner's son credited with saving life of Harper and Company. Chief. Employees filed into the building, whispering in clusters, stealing glances toward the lobby where Angela and Malik usually appeared. This time, however, things looked different. 2 security guards stood watch near the entrance. Malik sat beside his mother, his sketchbook open on his lap, but there was a visible tension in the air. Some employees nodded respectfully at him now, their eyes wide with admiration. Others avoided looking at Angela altogether, as though her sudden importance made them uncomfortable. And then, at 9 a.m. sharp, Richard Harper stepped into the lobby. But instead of marching past everyone toward his office, he stopped in the center of the room. Everyone, gather here, he said. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of command. Employees exchanged puzzled glances, but obeyed. Within minutes, the lobby filled with staff from every floor, engineers, managers, interns, receptionists. The cleaner stood awkwardly near the back, clutching Malik's hand. Richard waited until the crowd settled. His tall frame and commanding presence drew every eye. When he spoke, his words were deliberate. Yesterday morning, he began, my life was nearly taken. A device was planted in my car. Had it detonated, I would not be standing here. Gasps spread through the room, though most already knew. He continued, but what you may not know is this. The only reason I'm alive is because someone saw what no one else did. Someone shouted a warning when no one else dared. He turned, slowly, and his gaze landed on Malik. The boy froze, eyes wide. Richard extended a hand toward him. This boy, Richard said, his voice echoing through the lobby. Malik Morris, the son of our cleaner. All eyes turned. Angela's cheeks burned, but Malik held his ground, though his small hand trembled in his mother's. He stopped me from stepping into that car. Richard continued. He trusted his instinct, and because of that, I am here today. He is not just a boy. He is the reason this company still has its CEO. The crowd erupted in whispers. Some clapped hesitantly. Others looked stunned. A cleaner's son saving the CEO. It was the kind of story that felt too cinematic to be true. Richard raised a hand for silence. For too long, we've walked past people in this building without seeing them. The ones who polish the floors, who scrub the restrooms, who take out the trash. We treat them as invisible. Yesterday proved they are not. Angela's eyes blurred with tears. She had never imagined the CEO of the company would acknowledge her, let alone defend her role in front of everyone. Richard's next words, however, left the crowd in stunned silence. Effective immediately, he declared, I am creating a new scholarship fund in Malik's name. Every year, this company will sponsor the education of children of our staff. Cleaners, cafeteria workers, security guards, those who keep this place running without recognition. Malik will be the first recipient. A stunned hush fell over the room. Then a wave of murmurs. Employees glanced at each other. their faces a mix of shock, admiration, and disbelief. Angela clapped a hand over her mouth, sobbing quietly. Malik stared at Richard as though he were dreaming, but Richard wasn't done. "And one more thing," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "From this day forward, I want every person who works in this building, whether they carry a briefcase or a mop, to be treated with the same respect. Because yesterday reminded me that true value does not come from titles or paychecks. It comes from courage. It comes from heart." For a moment, silence reigned. Then, slowly applause began. First from a few employees near the back, then spreading like wildfire until the entire lobby thundered with clapping. Some cheered. Others wiped tears from their eyes. Angela wept openly, clutching Malik to her chest. The boy smiled shyly, overwhelmed by the sound of hundreds of hands clapping for him. Richard gave a single nod, then turned and walked toward the elevators, his figure tall, unshaken, every step echoing with authority. But for the first time in years, he wasn't walking alone in spirit. He carried with him the voice of a boy who had dared to shout, the ripple effect. By afternoon, the company was buzzing. Emails flew across departments. "Did you hear about the scholarship?" The CEO actually acknowledged the cleaners. Malik Morris is basically a hero. Reporters swarmed outside the building, hungry for details. Headlines shifted. CEO announces scholarship after cleaner's son saves his life. Harper & Company pledges equality across workforce. Angela's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends from church, old neighbors, even distant relatives sent messages. "We saw you on the news. Your boy is amazing. God blessed you today." But not everyone was happy. Behind closed doors, certain executives grumbled. Some muttered about PR stunts. Others whispered that Richard was losing his edge. One senior VP scoffed. "A CEO making decisions based on a kid's shout? That's not leadership. It's sentimentality." But Richard didn't care. For once, the opinions of board members and stockholders felt insignificant compared to the boy who had looked in the eye and shouted, "Don't get in the car." A private conversation. That evening, as the building emptied once again, Richard invited Angela and Malik to his office. The view from the top floor stretched across the city, skyscrapers glinting in the fading sunlight. Malik stood at the window, awed. Angela sat nervously, hands folded in her lap. "You didn't have to do that today," Angela said softly. "The speech, the scholarship, all of it. You've already done enough just by surviving." Richard leaned back in his chair. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. And because for too long, I've been blind to the people who keep this place alive." Angela shook her head. "People don't usually change overnight, sir. Especially not CEOs." Richard allowed a faint smile. "You're right. People don't. But sometimes near-death experiences remind you of what really matters." He looked at Malik, who was still gazing out at the skyline. "You remind me of someone I used to know," Richard said quietly. Angela tilted her head. "Who?" "My daughter," Richard admitted. "She was about your age when I stopped listening to her. Always full of ideas, full of instinct. I dismissed her too many times. And now," he trailed off, his voice heavy with regret, "now she barely speaks to me." Angela's heart softened. For all his power, Richard carried his own wounds. Malik turned, blinking. "Maybe you should call her," he said simply. Richard chuckled softly. "You're a bold one, aren't you?" Malik shrugged. "You listened to me once. Maybe you should listen again." The room fell quiet, but the boy's words lingered. For the first time in years, Richard considered dialing a number he hadn't dared to call. The company reacts. The next day, Harper & Company looked different. Employees greeted janitors with nods. Interns held open doors for security guards. The cafeteria workers were thanked more often than usual. Something had shifted, not just because of the scholarship or the speech, but because of the undeniable truth everyone had witnessed. In the moment of crisis, it wasn't a VP, a manager, or a shareholder who saved the CEO. It was a boy. And if that was true, then maybe the hierarchy they clung to wasn't as solid as they thought. Angela still worked her shifts, but now people smiled at her. Malik was treated like a small celebrity, though he remained humble, always carrying his sketchbook. But beneath the newfound respect and recognition, a question still loomed like a storm cloud. Who had planted the bomb? The investigation dragged on. Leads pointed to disgruntled contractors, angry competitors, even internal betrayal. Richard tightened security, but the truth remained elusive. And in the quiet of his office, Richard knew one thing for certain. Whoever had tried once might try again. This time, though, he wasn't facing it alone. Weeks passed, but the tension never fully left Harper & Company. The company had changed on the surface. Scholarships announced, cleaners acknowledged, Malik hailed as a quiet hero. But beneath it all, shadows lingered. Every morning, Richard still felt a flicker of unease when he walked through the lobby. Angela noticed the extra security station at the entrances, the new cameras, the way every visitor was double-checked. Malik still carried his sketchbook, but he watched the hallways more carefully now, as if waiting for another hidden danger. Then, one Friday evening, the storm finally broke. The betrayal. Richard was in his office when his head of security, Daniel, walked in. His face was grim. "We found him," Daniel said. Richard looked up. "Who?" "The one who planted the device." Daniel's jaw tightened. It wasn't an outsider. It was someone inside. Richard's chest went cold. "Who?" Daniel hesitated, then said the name. It was Gregory Shaw, Senior Vice President of Operations. Richard leaned back in his chair, stunned. Gregory had been with the company for over a decade. He was ambitious, polished, always at Richard's side during major decisions. To think he had turned traitor. "Why?" Richard demanded. Daniel's eyes hardened. "We confronted him. He admitted it. He thought the board would replace you with him if you were gone. Said he deserved to be CEO. He planned it weeks ago, waiting for the right morning." Richard's fists clenched. Betrayal burned deeper than fear ever could. "And what about Malik?" Richard asked quietly. Daniel shook his head. Gregory said the boy ruined everything. He never expected a kid to notice. Richard's eyes darkened. "Where is he now?" "In custody," Daniel replied. "Police have him. He won't be coming back here." Richard nodded, but his heart was heavy, betrayed by a man he trusted, and saved only by a boy he had nearly overlooked. The warning. That same evening, Richard called Angela and Malik to his office again. The city outside glowed with golden lights, but inside the room, the air was thick with tension. "Gregory Shaw," Richard said, pacing slowly. "One of my own executives. He planted the device. He wanted my seat." Angela gasped, covering her mouth. Malik's eyes widened. "But he's gone now," Richard continued. "You don't need to worry. Security has been tightened. This company is safe again." Malik frowned. "No, it's not." Richard stopped. "What do you mean?" The boy hugged his sketchbook to his chest. "It doesn't feel over. I don't know why, but I feel like the danger isn't just from him. It's bigger, like the company is sick, and he was only one part of it." Angela put a hand on her son's shoulder. "Malik, don't." But Richard held up a hand. His sharp eyes studied the boy. For months now, he had learned to trust that instinct. "What do you feel?" Richard asked softly. Malik hesitated, then whispered, "That people in this company care more about power than each other. That's what makes it dangerous." The word sank into Richard's chest like stones. He had spent his whole career building Harper & Company into a fortress of profit and power. But at what cost? Gregory's betrayal wasn't born overnight. It was a product of a culture Richard himself had created. And now, an 11-year-old boy was holding up a mirror, the CEO's decision. The following Monday, Richard shocked the company once more. He called another all-hands meeting in the lobby. Employees gathered nervously, whispers filling the air. Angela stood near the back with Malik. Unsure of why they had been asked to attend again, Richard stood before them, his posture strong, but his eyes carrying a weight no one could miss. "Last week," he began, "we discovered the truth about the attack on my life. It was not an outsider. It was not a competitor. It was one of our own." The crowd gasped. Gregory Shaw betrayed this company. He planted the device in hopes of replacing me. He failed. But his betrayal was not born in isolation. It was born from something far worse, a culture of greed, a culture I allowed to thrive. Employees shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. Richard's voice was steady but raw. For years, I demanded profit above all else. I pushed you harder, faster, higher. I taught you to chase numbers, not values. And Gregory was simply the reflection of what I had created. That ends today. The room fell silent. No one had ever heard Richard Harper admit fault. From this day forward, he continued, Harper & Company will not only be a company of innovation, it will be a company of integrity. We will value people over profit. We will honor the cleaners as much as the coders, the security guards as much as the executives. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that true strength comes from unity, not ambition. He paused, then looked directly at Malik. And sometimes, it takes the voice of a child to remind us of that. Dozens of eyes turned to Malik. The boy flushed, shrinking behind his mother. But the applause that followed was thunderous, louder than before, louder than anyone had ever heard in that lobby. Angela wept quietly, holding her son's hand. Richard's eyes glistened, though he quickly blinked it away. The call. That night, Richard sat alone in his penthouse. The city stretched before him, but his mind was elsewhere. He picked up his phone, staring at a number he hadn't dialed in years. His daughter's number. For so long, pride and stubbornness had silenced him, but Malik's words echoed in his ears. You listened to me once. Maybe you should listen again. With trembling fingers, Richard pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, then, hello, a soft, uncertain voice answered. Richard swallowed hard. Emily, it's me. It's Dad. Silence. Then, a shaky breath. Why are you calling? Richard closed his eyes. Because I almost died, and because a boy reminded me that family is more important than anything else. I don't want to lose you, Emily. Not again. The line was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, she said, I'm glad you called. And for the first time in years, Richard Harper allowed himself to cry. A new beginning. Months later, Harper & Company looked different. The scholarship fund flourished. Employees reported higher morale. Relationships across the company shifted. There was more kindness, more respect. Angela received a promotion, overseeing cleaning staff with better pay and benefits. Malik continued his schooling, with the company funding his future education. He still carried his sketchbook, but now he filled it with dreams of becoming an architect. Richard, meanwhile, walked the halls differently. He stopped to greet employees by name. He ate lunch with security guards. He even visited Angela and Malik on weekends, sometimes bringing his daughter Emily, slowly rebuilding the bridge between them. The company had nearly lost its leader. Instead, it had gained something greater, its soul. And all because one morning, a boy shouted 6 words that changed everything. Don't get in the car. Epilogue. Years later, Malik stood on a university stage, diploma in hand, as Richard Harper sat proudly in the front row beside Angela. Cameras flashed, applause thundered, but Malik's eyes found a man who had once been untouchable, now family. Richard smiled, nodding his heart full. For all his wealth, for all his power, nothing had ever shocked the company or himself more than the moment he learned that sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest truth. And in that truth, he had finally found redemption.